thank you very much, Zac, for taking the time to join us today. We're going to be talking about the magnificent work you did for your firm's brand refresh, Tilakey and Gibbons. Everyone go and check out the amazing brand refresh. So thanks for joining us, Zac.
My pleasure. Thanks, Will, and thanks for the opportunity to discuss it. It's been a long process, and I'm very happy to share some learnings from it.
Yeah, so I want to start off with, okay, why now? Like, what prompted this brand refresh? Because this is an arduous process that no one takes willingly, right? So what prompted that discussion and what kicked it off, really?
Sure, absolutely. So it started out, as I think these things often do, as a much smaller project. It was initially a website redesign, and that became almost immediately a forum for airing grievances with other elements of the design of the firm's branding as a whole. In particular, the start of the snowball was the logo. We used to have, Tilakey and Gibbons is quite a long name, and the old logo was all on one line. And so as we were talking about redesigning the website, we realized that any redesign we had to do had to accommodate that lengthy logo rather than the other way round, rather than it being something you could drop in. And then we found the same with the color scheme. That it used to be sort of a black and brick type color, and we found that didn't go with anything. And it was all of these things sort of spiraled until eventually we went, well, we may as well just make this a full brand refresh, bring it into the
yeah. Well, you mentioned you want to redo the website. What prompted that? Like,
sure.
It was just about time. You want to do something new.
Exactly that. It was just about time. So our old website was finalized in 2011, and it was for the time it was very advanced, and it was a fantastic repository of publications first and foremost. That was really the thrust of our marketing, and it still was incredibly functional, but the design had just become a little bit dated.
Yeah. Okay. So now you've had that discussion. You guys were looking. Okay, we're going to do a full brand refresh. Okay, where the green light has been pressed. How did you set up the team? Was there like a working group? What was the structure like on the project management side? Internally, how was that arranged?
Sure. So it was democratic on one side with a single tyrant overseeing. No, it was very much a team effort on sort of the back end. So everything was workshopped as a group by several key members of my team, who most of whom I'm very fortunate to have on this call, actually, so I'll be careful what I say. And then we outsourced some of the process. So the website builds itself and some of the design elements, particularly anything that stemmed from the website, so some of the photography and things like that, were outsourced to an external company. And effectively, initially I acted as a single point of contact between us and the outsourcers, and they had a single point of contact on their side. So it sort of, everything was thrown back to the pool when it came to us, and we'd all discuss it and workshop it on our end. And then it all got tidied up and relayed back to the relevant people on the other side. So that sort of bottleneck approach, that funnel approach. I think bottleneck is the negative term, funnel is the positive term for the exact same.
I think so. I think that's how it goes. So you have this back. So you had your team and then the agency team. Was this done through email? Was there sort of a centralized Basecamp or Teams channel, or how was that handled?
So like anything in a law firm, things default to email, no matter how hard you try elsewhere. My team communicates an awful lot through Teams. So that's a much quicker and much more effective way of workshopping ideas. A lot of stuff still went through email. In terms of the project management itself, when we were communicating with the outsourced team, we ended up using Trello for that, but we went through a few different a few different options, including we toyed with Microsoft Planner. We played with very briefly played with Asana and a few other options. At one point we played with a locally developed app called Blue, which was a nice idea, but ultimately we ended up with Trello because it was what the outsourced company was most comfortable with, and it's easy to use.
Yeah. So now you mentioned you had a change in color, change in font, all this sort of stuff. How was that decided? Like, who decided the blue? Was there a workshopping? Did you do like, testing it out on people? How did you pick on that shade of blue versus something else?
Sure. So that was actually a surprisingly long process. That and the logo itself were probably the two most contentious. Contentious seems the wrong word, but it was the one that certainly got discussed the most and bounced around. So initially we did a small focus group among key figures within the firm. And that was deliberately a very wide range of people, including sort of junior lawyers, some long-serving non-legal staff, a couple of senior partners, and we just workshopped a few different ideas, and that's both on the color and on the logo, and sort of took all of that into account and changed and modified over time. We're very fortunate at Tilakey to have a management committee structure whereby we don't need the sign-off of all 28 parts on everything, on every final decision. It's a 5-person management committee, which is 4 partners and our COO, Andrew, who's called. And so all of the final decision on those went through the management committee. 5 people is still a committee, so there was still a lot of bouncing around and a lot of changing at that stage. But nowhere near as much as it could have been if it was a full partnership.
So on the logo, did you rely on a graphic designer to kind of propose a few options, and then you guys picked like, oh, we like these 2, and then you just sort of go down that revision path? Or you guys come up with the design yourself?
Bit of a hype. So we did workshop ideas with an outsourced graphic designer, and after what must have been 100 different options, we decided that we could do it better ourselves. We're very fortunate to have a graphic designer on our team. And so ultimately, she designed the iteration of the logo that we have now. And actually, the reason that we brought that back in rather than leaving it with the outsourced was really important to us. We found that all of the versions that had been produced previously didn't speak to the heritage of the firm. And no matter how much you ask people to do that, there's no way that they can unless they have a good understanding of the firm and what matters to us. So Tilakey's 130 years old. It's got this long traditional background to it, although it's a very forward-thinking firm. And the logo really had to speak to that. So what we ended up doing was a sort of a hark back to older logos with a redesigned color scheme, a slightly redesigned font. It used to be a very severe serif and very spiky. A little more softened, a little more rounded.
Okay, yeah. So I think a brand is more than just a logo and a color scheme, right? So when you're looking at this brand refresh, what were some of the other factors that you were thinking about refreshing? Like, were the brand identity or the, your core value statements, any of that sort of stuff? Was any of that refreshed?
It was certainly discussed. So we didn't amend our core values or our core value proposition, but we made a real effort to put them front and center in a way that we haven't been able to do with the old design. Not that we didn't want to. It's always, the intention is always for that to be at the heart of what we do, but this gave us a new opportunity to put it first and foremost. I think the biggest visual element of that is how important our people are to us. We have a reputation of being a very collegial firm, a very well-deserved one. And really, our people are very much what makes us. So we made a decision quite early on to have a sort of a photo-forward design to both the website and to marketing publications. And we built those photos internally. We made our own stock photos using our own stuff, which is a huge undertaking.
Yeah, no, I like that because last week, our members on the BD Roundtable in UK, they held a call with a photographer, and we were talking about, and this will be up on the Resource Center in maybe a month or two, but we talked about the importance of photography and actually showing your law firm and showing the people in your law firm and what it's like to work with them. So I was very pleased, and it was a bit refreshing on your site. You actually see the people in your premise, not some stranger, stock photo.
Absolutely, absolutely. And actually, the photo is one of the last things that we did. And we knew that it was going to be the core of it early on, but we wanted to wait until the rest of the design was finished so we had the right artistic direction for those photos. So all the way through the design process, we had these terrible stock photos as placeholder images. And we got to a point where there was one guy in the stock photos who appeared so often that we kind of want to track him down and hire him. He feels like that. But yeah, no, those shop bought store photos, they're stock photos. They're so uncomfortable. They feel so artificial and weird.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of questions about the website and specifically what was changed, but I'll save that for the roundtable session. But as we close up this interview, I want to ask you, okay, looking back now, what are some of the things that you would have done differently? Was there anything that you kind of forgot that you're like, oh, we forgot to change that? Let's change that now. Any 2020 vision insights?
Yeah, I could go on for quite a while with that answer. I will say that the podium for our auditorium, which is a fabulously branded speaking platform, is being delivered today, a month and a half after the brand was launched. Not necessarily because we forgot in the early stages, but because during the pandemic, it was something that we didn't see every day. I think that would probably be my key takeaway. Don't rebrand during the pandemic if you can possibly avoid it. In terms of key things to do differently, I think that I would have been a little more rigorous on front loading the time frame, and so really cementing that time frame early on, because these things are so complex that they're never going to run 100% to deadlines. But we had a few, mostly because of the pandemic, we had a few areas where it slipped a bit further than I would have liked. And I think if we would have got, project management software, which we discussed earlier, if we decided on that before we started, rather than adapting to the teams we were working with, I think that would have saved a lot of time. And
management, and then so project management software. But what about the time frame? What do you say? Front loading? So
basically, identifying anything that could potentially cause delays early on and getting them out of the way right at the start of the project. This is, it's sort of the project management equivalent of a design sprint. It's really identifying what the hiccups could be and making sure that you do those right at the start. So there were a few of those. One of the biggest ones for me is marketing collateral, and the little giveaways and things like that. The things that it seems like such an easy thing. You go, oh, of course, you put the logo on some pens, and so we'll save that until later. And actually, if we'd done that right at the start, we would have had a much less stressful 2 weeks of rollout. As we tried to, last minute design roll-up banners and things like that.
Did you have any self-imposed deadlines? Like, were you trying to roll this out before something? Because I noticed that you kind of quietly rolled this out during COVID, right? So that's an and sort of it doesn't really look so good if you're saying, hey, look our flashy new logo and website during a global pandemic when people are struggling. So how did you handle that rollout there?
Sure. Yeah. So the original launch schedule, it was due to launch in Q3 of 2020. We started the process before the pandemic hit, and the 2020 was also our 130th anniversary as a firm. So it all tied together very neatly, and there would have been several celebrations throughout the year. We had a very good 130th anniversary plan throughout the year, and it was, it would have formed part of that to some degree. But you're absolutely right. During a pandemic is no time to be announcing how wonderful you are. When clients are approaching you for restructuring and for labor, contentious labor matters, that's not the time that they want to be joining you for a party to celebrate with lovely people.
Right.
So yeah, we ended up doing it as a soft rollout. So.
Right. All right. So any last piece of advice for that lonely BD manager who's has to take this on in the future? One final tip for them.
Yeah. Itemize. Make sure that you have a full catalog of everything that bears your brand. And do that as many times as you can, because every time you do it, you will miss things. We must have had 5 or 6 of these itemizing meetings and then gone off and done trips around the firm. And I have countless examples of unexpected surprises that came up during that process. But the best one was a meeting where we were all sat in one of our meeting rooms. We have these beautiful meeting rooms, and we were sat discussing, going through, notepads and USB sticks and things like that. And right at the end of the meeting, as we were standing up to leave, put my hand on my glass of drinking water and realized that the glass was etched with the firm logo. And it's one of those things, you use it so often, you use it every day that you don't think of it. So there will always be more things with the brand on than the old brand on than you think there will be. Keep itemizing. Well, it's not done.
Yeah, a brand is a living thing, right? So there's always room for improvement. All right, so for those of you watching on YouTube, we're actually going to carry on to a roundtable session. We have about 17 people on the call who will all, discuss this in more detail. So if you're not yet a BD Roundtable member, head over to bdroundtable.com to sign up to become a member. And make sure you connect with Zac on LinkedIn. Is there any other place that they can connect with you, Zac?
No, LinkedIn's the best place. It's the most frequently known.
Okay.
I do have a Twitter, but it's mostly a viewer.
yes, for news.
Just lurking.
Okay. Thanks so much, Zac. We appreciate it.